The hypocrisy was breathtaking. He was destroying my life, our life, while promising a new one to her, all built on a foundation of lies and stolen money. The man I had loved for a decade didn't exist. He was a fiction, a character Ben played, and I was the fool who had believed in him. I felt a grief so profound it was a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. I wanted to stop. I wanted to close the laptop and scream until my throat was raw, but I couldn't. Some dark, morbid compulsion drove me onward, deeper into the wreckage. I had to see it all. I had to know the full extent of the rot. It was in the sent folder of this secret account, buried beneath years of love letters and lies, that I found the final, unthinkable truth. It was a truth so monstrous it eclipsed everything else. It was, in a series of emails not to Olivia, but to his brother, Mark. The first one was from 6 months ago, right after he'd lost the big contract. It was a long, rambling, self-pitying tirade about his financial problems. He confessed he'd been gambling online, trying to win back his losses, but had only dug himself into a deeper hole. He was ruined, he said. Utterly ruined. The next email, a month later, was when the tone shifted from despair to something cold and calculating. "There's no way out of this," he wrote to Mark. "The bank is going to take the house. Olivia is getting impatient. I'm trapped." And then came the line that would be seared into my memory for the rest of my life. "You know," he wrote, "I took out that life insurance policy on Anya years ago. The big one, when things were good. I'm the sole beneficiary. I stopped breathing. Life insurance?" He had never mentioned a life insurance policy. I had my own, a small one through the library system. What was he talking about? Mark's reply was a single, horrified line. "Ben, what the hell are you thinking? Don't even go there." But Ben went there. His final email to his brother, sent just 2 weeks ago, was a detailed, chilling monologue. He laid out his plan. He talked about my predictable routines, my love of working late in my office in the converted attic. He talked about the old, faulty wiring in that part of the house, wiring he had installed himself when he renovated the space for me. "A simple electrical fire," he wrote. "Tragic accident. The beloved librarian working late on a project, trapped by the flames. Heartbreaking. And the policy pays out $2 million. Enough to clear my debts, start fresh with Olivia, and have plenty left over." He wasn't just a cheater. He wasn't just a gambler. He wasn't just a liar. He was a monster. The man I had shared my bed with, the man whose head I had cradled in my lap, was actively, methodically plotting to murder me. The foreclosure wasn't the end game. It was the catalyst. The affair wasn't just a betrayal. It was the motive. My death was his solution, his freedom. For a long moment, I was paralyzed, frozen in a state of pure, primal terror. The world dissolved into a roaring in my ears. The man I loved was going to kill me. The house he had built for us was meant to be my tomb. Then, something inside me shifted. The terror receded, replaced by a surge of icy, crystalline rage. The librarian, the quiet archivist, took over. Information was power, and I was now in possession of the most powerful information in the world. I had the truth. My movements became swift, precise, methodical. I created a new anonymous email address on a secure web client. One by one, I forwarded every single incriminating email to that new address, the foreclosure notices, the contract termination, the love letters to Olivia, and the horrifying, damning emails between Ben and his brother. I created a digital dossier of his crimes, a perfect, time-stamped record of his descent. Then, I forwarded that entire collection to my personal email account and to my sister's with a single stark subject line: "If anything happens to me, read this." I went back into his accounts and covered my tracks with the precision of a master forger. I deleted every email from his sent folders. I cleared his browser history, his cache, his cookies. I logged out of everything. I closed the laptop, wiped it clean of my fingerprints, and placed it back on his desk at the exact angle he had left it. I had built my own digital fortress around his. Ben came home the next evening, smelling of pine and campfire smoke. He was tan, relaxed, and smiling. He dropped his bags and wrapped me in his arms, kissing me deeply. It felt like being kissed by a snake. I didn't flinch. I kissed him back. "God, I missed you," he murmured, his voice thick with false affection. "What did you do all weekend? Get lost in your books?" "Something like that," I said, my voice unervingly calm. "Just a quiet weekend." The conversation we had over dinner was the greatest performance of my life. I asked about his trip. I listened to his fabricated stories of catching fish and drinking beer with his friends. I smiled, I laughed. All the while, the words from his email echoed in my head: a simple electrical fire. Tragic accident. He was clearing the dishes when he said it. His tone was casual, offhand. "You know, I noticed the light in your office was flickering again before I left. The wiring up there is so old. I should probably take a look at it this week. Maybe fix it for you on Saturday." He looked at me and smiled. A helpful, loving smile. The threat was no longer a hypothetical text on a screen. It had a date, a time. It was real. That night, I lay beside him in bed, my body rigid, my ears straining at every creak of the house. He fell asleep quickly, his breathing deep, and even the breathing of a man without a conscience. I waited until I was sure he was soundly asleep. Then I slipped out of bed. I had a small bag packed and hidden in the back of my closet. I grabbed it along with my car keys and my purse. I walked through the house, our house, one last time. Every object, every piece of furniture felt tainted. Part of a crime scene that had not yet happened. I didn't leave a note. My confrontation would not be a tearful, dramatic scene in our living room. A confrontation with a man planning to kill you is not a confrontation. It is a suicide. My freedom was not in shouting the truth at him. It was in using that truth to disappear into the night, to save my own life. I closed the front door behind me, the soft click of the latch the only sound in the silent street. I got in my car and drove away, not looking back. I had entered that house as a woman in love, a woman who believed in trust above all else. I left it as a survivor, armed with a terrible, liberating truth. The truth I had found in his emails was my shield, my weapon, and my escape route. It was the key that had finally set me free. The first call I made was to my sister, The second was to the police. I met with 2 detectives the next morning in a sterile interview room, my printed out emails stacked neatly on the table between. U.S. I told them everything. They listened, their expressions shifting from skepticism to grim belief as they read the words Ben had written. The specificity of his plan, the mention of the faulty wiring, it was a credible, imminent threat. They arrested him that afternoon. It was on the local news. They showed him being led from our house in handcuffs, his face a mask of bewildered indignation. The monster was in a cage. The months that followed were a crucible. My life as I knew it had been demolished. The house was seized by the bank. I had to testify against Ben, to sit in a courtroom and watch him stare at me with eyes full of hatred. As I read his murderous words aloud, the trial was a local sensation, the librarian and the architect killer. I was no longer a private person. I was a public story, but through it all, I felt a strange and powerful sense of liberation. The person I had been, the trusting, dependent, technologically timid Anya had died in that house. The woman who emerged was different. She was cautious. Yes, but she was also strong, self-reliant. The act of violating his privacy, the thing I had dreaded most, was the very act that had empowered me. It had taught me that information is not just power. It is survival. A year later, the legal battles were over. Ben was convicted, his appeals exhausted. He would spend the next several decades in prison. I was living in a small, bright apartment in a new city, a place that was entirely mine, its network and its passwords known only to me. I still work in a library. I still believe in the sanctity of stories, but I no longer believe in blind faith. Trust, I have learned, is not a gift to be given freely. It is a contract, one that requires verification. The truth I found buried in the dark corners of Ben's digital world was ugly and terrifying, but it was the truth, and it was the only thing that could set me free. Trust, for me, was a religion. It was a quiet, sturdy faith built on the principle of benevolent non-interference. I was a librarian, a custodian of information, and my reverence for privacy was absolute. I believed that people were entitled to their locked drawers, their sealed letters, their password-protected worlds. For 10 years, that faith had been centered on one person, Ben, my Ben, the man who had designed our life with the same sleek, minimalist precision he applied to the houses he built. Our home was his masterpiece, a testament to his love for clean lines and smart technology. It was a world of recessed lighting, integrated speakers, and a home network so complex I couldn't have navigated it with a map. Ben had handled it all. The finances were entirely online, managed through accounts only he accessed. The security system, the thermostat, the streaming services, they were all tied to his master account, his digital kingdom. He framed it as a kindness, a way to unburden me from the tedious complexities of the modern world. Don't you worry about it, Anya, he'd say, his voice a warm, reassuring hum. You're the poet, the dreamer. Let me be the pragmatist. I'll handle the tech stuff. And I had let him. I, who could locate a rare 17th century manuscript from a single obscure reference, felt a wave of incompetence wash over me whenever I had to reset a Wi-Fi router. Ben had cultivated this dependence with a masterful subtlety, his help always tinged with a patient condescension that reinforced my role as the technologically inept damsel. When he bought me a new phone, he would spend an hour setting it up for me, handing it back with a smile. A perfectly curated device that I later realized was logged into his Apple ID, not mine. It was all for convenience, he said, for simplicity. I chose to believe him. My love for him was intertwined with my faith in his goodness, and my trust in him was the foundation upon which our life was built. But foundations can crack. The fissures began as hairline fractures in his behavior, a growing distance, a distracted air. His phone, once left casually on the coffee table, was now perpetually in his pocket. He started taking calls on the back patio, his voice a low, urgent murmur that the wind snatched away before it could reach me. He, who had always been a terrible liar, was suddenly fluent in the language of evasion. Then came the financial strain. A vague tightness I could feel but not see. Whispers of slow-paying clients, of a big project being delayed. When I gently suggested we review our finances together, he became defensive, a wounded look in his eyes. "Do you not trust me, Anya?" he'd asked, the question itself a weapon. And I, ever the peacekeeper, ever the faithful, would back down, ashamed of my own brief heresy. The schism that would shatter my faith came on a rainy Saturday afternoon. Ben was on a weekend fishing trip with friends, a rare boys' weekend he claimed he desperately needed. I was curled up on the sofa, a book in my lap, the quiet hum of the rain a peaceful companion. An email notification pinned from my laptop. The subject line, in stark, terrifying capitals, read, "Final notice of foreclosure." My blood ran cold. I clicked it open. It was from a law firm representing our mortgage lender. The language was brutal, unequivocal. 3 missed payments. A default on our loan agreement. An outstanding balance of over $20,000 due in 10 days to avoid seizure of the property, our property. The home Ben had designed. The home I thought was our sanctuary. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process the words. It had to be a mistake, a phishing scam. Ben handled the mortgage. He transferred the money every month like clockwork. He would have told me. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone to call him. Straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Ben. Can't get to the phone. Leave a message." His cheerful, recorded voice was a mocking echo from a life that, just 5 minutes ago, I thought was mine. I called again and again. Voicemail. Every single time, panic, cold and sharp, began to claw its way up my throat. I needed answers. I needed to see the bank statements, the transfer records, anything. But it was all locked away in his digital fortress, the one he had so kindly built to unburden me. And then I saw it. On the desk in his home office, the sleek silver lid of his laptop was slightly ajar. He'd been working on something before he left and, in his haste, had forgotten to close it down. A lapse in security so profound, so unlike him, that it felt like an act of cosmic intervention. I stood before his desk, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the Rubicon. To cross it was to violate a decade of trust, to shatter my own deeply held principles about privacy. It was to admit, in the starkest possible terms, that I did not trust the man I loved. But the alternative was to sit here, blind and helpless, while our home was ripped out from under me. The lawyer's letter lay open on my own laptop, a death warrant for our life together. My choice was clear. My home, my life, my future, they were more important than my faith. With a hand that felt like a traitor's, I lifted the screen of his laptop. It was open, logged in, his email client staring back at me like an unblinking eye. My trespass began with a single, justifiable purpose: to find evidence of the mortgage payments. I typed the name of the lender into his email search bar. The results flooded the screen, a cascade of unread emails marked with angry red exclamation points. My stomach hollowed out as I began to read. It was a timeline of a slow-motion catastrophe. It started 6 months ago with a polite payment overdue reminder. Then came the more insistent warnings, the default notices, the official letters from the bank's loss mitigation department. They had called him dozens of times. They had sent registered letters. And woven between them were Ben's own emails to the bank. They were a litany of lies and desperate promises. My apologies, there was a clerical error with my auto draft. I've been traveling for work. I will wire the full amount tomorrow. A major client payment is clearing next week, and you will be the first priority. He had been lying to them for months. And by extension, he had been lying to me. Every time he'd kissed me goodbye, every time he'd told me he loved me, this secret was festering beneath the surface. I scrolled further, my search widening. I looked for correspondence with his biggest client, the architecture firm he was supposedly designing a new headquarters for. I found a thread that made my blood run even colder. The final email, dated 4 months ago, was from the firm's managing partner. It was a formal termination of his contract, citing gross negligence and failure to meet critical deadlines. Ben had lost the biggest project of his career and had never said a word. The financial ruin was just the first layer of the archaeological dig into my own life. As I scanned his bank records, which he had so helpfully saved as PDFs in a folder marked taxes, I saw a name I didn't recognize: Olivia. There were regular payments to her, sent via an online payment app, hundreds of dollars every few weeks. The memos were innocuous: dinner, gift, for the weekend. Curiosity, now a toxic, all-consuming force, took over. Who was Olivia? I typed her name into his email search. A few innocuous emails came up. A group dinner reservation from a year ago. It wasn't enough. It didn't explain the regular payments. But as I scrolled through the search results, I saw something else. An email from a web service confirming the creation of a new email address, archibendesign@email.com. It wasn't his professional address. It was a private one, a secret one. My mind raced. How could I access it? It was a long shot, a desperate hope, but I searched his draft folder, and there it was. An unsent email, a single line of text. It was a password, a complex string of letters and numbers followed by the note for the other one. I opened a new browser window, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I typed in the secret email address and pasted the password. I held my breath and clicked log in. Access granted. If his first email account was the site of his financial ruin, this one was the museum of his emotional betrayal. It was an archive of a 4-year affair with Olivia, a woman from his old university alumni group. There were hundreds of emails, passionate, breathless love letters that made my stomach turn. He used phrases, pet names that I thought were reserved for me. He had taken the private language of our love and given it to another woman. There were hotel confirmations for cities he was supposed to be in for work, scanned receipts for jewelry I had never seen, plane tickets for romantic getaways. He had a whole other life running in parallel to ours, funded by the money that should have been paying for our home. I read an email from just 3 weeks ago. In it, he promised Olivia that he was going to leave me. I just need to sort out this financial mess, he wrote. Once I'm back on my feet, I'll be free. We can finally be together. Just be patient a little longer, my love.